Okay, so the last thing to talk about today, which is thankfully quite fun, fluffy, and friendly, is working as a team. I'm sure you all love working as a team, right? I like working as a team. I hope you like working as a team. We're going to be talking a little bit about the friendly side of working as a team and some of the operational sides of working as a team. There is no coding in this little bit. It's just a bit of fun. So it's important to learn about methods to help a standard software team function, right? You're in a group, 4 or 5 people. How do we make sure you work well together? We're going to talk about some agile practices, stand-up sprints, task boards, meeting in minutes, some real kind of hands-on stuff. Let me start with my approach to teaching teamwork in 1531 is pretty straightforward. I don't think I can stand up here and tell you what a good team member is and what a bad team member is and what you should and shouldn't do in all these theoretical scenarios you haven't come across, right? It's like if someone tried to explain to you how to survive in the desert when you hadn't been there. You can take notes and stuff, but it doesn't really make sense until you go there. So I try and be very high level in this course so that hopefully in future courses they can delve into it a bit deeper, because for many of you it's the first time you've coded in groups of people. So there's tips and stuff and guidance we give you, but we try and be very philosophical about it rather than specific a lot of the time. But let's get into it. So firstly, this term, agile, you've probably heard it before. It's a hot topic. People talk about it, do you use agile or is this agile and stuff. The worst thing I think you can probably do at this stage of your career is to interpret agile as a set of rules, like a recipe. Like, okay, I'm going to learn about agile software development, which consists of these 5 things. I got to wake up, and then I got to stand northwest, and I got to count to 10, like very specific stuff. But in actual fact, it's not... We don't want to teach it to you as if it's a process to follow that guarantees success, but rather we want to teach it to you as a set of principles and philosophies. Right? So it's not a process, but it's a philosophy. That philosophy is basically outlined here. And it's a philosophy that informs a lot of what we try and do as software engineering. It doesn't really matter whether you have agile or any of this stuff. This is kind of true no matter what. And when someone talks about agile, you should always just be thinking about these things here. So agile is really 4 kind of key principles to keep in mind. And these are essentially priorities. So rather than being obsessed when it comes to software development, rather than being obsessed with tools, GitHub, Bitbucket, GitLab, VS Code, Sublime, gedit, WebStorm, like all these other things. Instead of being worried about processes and tools, you should focus a little bit more on individuals and interactions. So you as a team, whether you're a team member or a leader in the team, you need to be focused on the human element. How are people feeling? Are they interacting? Are they communicating? Right? That's more important than whether you use GitHub or Bitbucket. If people can't talk, people can't communicate and share and trust each other, then it's like, doesn't matter what processes and tools you have. Number 2, working software is more important than comprehensive documentation. We're not building a skyscraper here where you need to plan for months and months and months. It's really important that software always works. It's really important that you write tests and that your software is stable and safe. That is more important than software that is well documented. You would rather poorly documented code that's stable and well tested than well documented code that's stable and not well tested. Customer collaboration is more important than contract negotiation. Now this one's a little bit beyond the scope of this course, but what we're really saying here is that when you build software, it's not about sitting down in January and working with the boss or the client or someone and saying, yep, this is everything we're going to do for the year. Goodbye, F off, we don't need to talk anymore, don't come to me. We already agreed, we already decided what we're doing. There's an emphasis on actually collaborating with people, talking to them, meeting with them weekly. This isn't to do with your team. This is more like, if you're in a consumer-based company, like Google or, YouTube, Netflix, Spotify, talking to customers, learning about how customers feel about things. If you're in like a business-to-business environment, like, what would a big business-to-business be that you'd all know of very easily? I don't know. Salesforce, Lend-Lease to an extent. The problem is consumers don't know about them. Someone might come up with a good example, but for businesses that are mainly, worried about serving other businesses, the main priority with them is to talk to their clients, the other businesses that they're helping. And then the last thing is responding to change over following a plan. Everything you do in the engineering world is often ridden by changes in plans, right? Things change all the time. You start today, you want to do something, plans change. Your team members drop, your team members change class, someone gets sick, Hayden releases a new iteration with completely new details in it that weren't based on what you saw before, stuff, and so don't get caught up with like having a plan and sticking to a plan. Be ready to adapt, be ready to respond to change. Now, there's a really important note here on the bottom, which is that it's not the stuff on the right. It's not the processes, tools, plans, negotiations, and documentation don't matter. It's just that they matter less than what's on the left. And that's really important to keep in mind. So, in summary, Agile is a philosophy and a culture. It's used to inform processes. So I'm not a big fan of telling you, this is how you need to run a meeting. This is how often you need to meet. This is where you need to meet. This is what you need to say. You can do that if you want, as long as, and this is true kind of across the industry, whilst places you work or organizations you're part of might do things differently in process, in general, it's pretty reasonable to assume that these are some good guiding principles of most software projects. So, but the details will vary. When you think about engineering, if many of you might think about something like this, which is and you probably, if you've ever been a kid looking at a building get built, you've probably thought about this. Okay, they plan the building, they build the building, they make sure it's working, they open it, they maintain it. All types of engineering do this. They all follow a fairly similar process. You got to figure out what you're trying to do. You got to plan how you're going to do it. You got to do it. You got to make sure it works. Make it available to people. Make sure it stays available and healthy. In software engineering, one of the biggest differences is that, and we'll keep talking about this, whilst we follow this approach, we do it faster. We do it in cycles. So it's not like we have, we're not like we're building the Crown Casino in Sydney. It's like a 10-year build or something. It's not like we're building West Connects or North Connects or anything like that. We're writing software, and sometimes our iterations are a year, a month, a week, a couple of days. You say, what's the problem? Figure out a plan, build it, test it. Test it, build it. Those two things, don't read too much into the ordering there. Because in reality, sometimes you test a bit, build a bit, test a bit, build a bit, test a bit, build a bit. You'll learn more about this in iteration 1. But we do a similar thing to all other kinds of engineering. We just iterate on it a bit more frequently than them. So we kind of do that as quickly as possible. That's why you'll often hear about phrases like iterative design and iterative processes. And the idea with those is just to say that let's go through the cycle as quickly as possible, rather than sitting down for 10 weeks, writing code for 10 weeks. Like, you could write 1,000 lines of code in 10 weeks and push it all out at once at the end. Or, instead of writing 1,000 lines of code in 10 weeks, you could write 100 lines of code and release it every week and build upon that. And that's really useful because the more you release, the more you iterate, the quicker you iterate, you learn more because you get things in the hands of people who are using your software more frequently. You also de-risk yourself because a lot of software you write, no matter what you do, will have bugs in it. And it's much better to deal with a little bug here and there all the time than it is to deal with 100 bugs that come out all of a sudden. One way that a lot of teams tend to structure how they work in this environment, therefore, with a lot of iterative designs, is to create this notion of a sprint. This is not something that we expect you to adhere to very strongly in the course. It's not something, and it really depends on the nature of the organization you're with. But basically, the idea of a sprint is if you imagine that your group meets once a week, right, for your project. So you meet once a week, and every week you sit down and you say, what are we going to do this week? Let's come up with a plan, Kai, you do A, B, and Jess is going to do C, D, and Brinda's like, I'll do E and F. That's your plan. Then you work that week, or maybe a fortnight, depending on what your idea is. And then you come back and you say, how did it go? And someone says, I got this done, I got that done, I didn't get this done. And then you set some new things and you go again. That sounds pretty logical, right? I don't need to call that a sprint for you to think that makes some sense. But the idea of a sprint more formally is that it's a chunk of time, it's a fixed amount of time, not a fixed scope. And you only look that far ahead and you work towards that. So let's imagine, 1531. It's really hard with 1531 because the iterations are quite small. That's why I don't really like enforcing this on groups. But let's just say, for instance, most of you should plan to meet once a week. You can call it a sprint if you want. And you sit down and you say, okay, what are we going to do this week? And the week is the constant part. And you come and you meet again in a week. You don't meet when it's done. You don't meet if it's done in 10 days or 14 days. You meet in a week when it's done. And you just chat again. You chat again and you say, how did it go? Let's set some more objectives. So, as part of this structure, let's talk about some more practical elements that'll work for you. And then that'll be it. So important parts of teamwork: staying in sync, tracking stuff, good practices, and some team dynamics. So firstly, staying in sync. Two things here. First one is an idea of stand-ups. Now, stand-ups are an idea of having frequent, short, often daily meetings to update each other, and they're very relevant for people who are working on the same thing, right? So in my company, we don't do stand-ups because we're a very small company with a very big set of work to do. So a lot of people are working on different things. So, imagine, someone's working on, making the app faster, and someone else over here is on making the app green. I don't know. And because they're working on different things, there's no need for people to chat every day. It's really useful when people are working on the exact same stuff, which is what you're doing with the projects. You're working on this tiny little piece of software. I know it'll feel big, but it's actually a very small piece of software, which is so you're all kind of working, overlapping each other. And it's basically where you get up and you talk about what you did in the last day, what you are going to do for the next day, and maybe some problems or things you need to discuss further. And in fact, you don't even have to ask those three things. You can ask whatever the hell you want, but the point is that these stand-ups are designed to give you a moment to update people, to put out there what you intend to work on, and then to reflect the next day on how you did. That's it. Now, when it comes to stand-ups, normally these used to be done at work. You turn up to work, 11 a.m. might be a time for a stand-up. It's like before lunch. Some teams do it at 8:30, 9, 9:30, 10, 10:30. Some people do it just before lunch. It doesn't really matter. But typically it was done a lot, from what I could tell, between 9 and 12. But with COVID-19 and more people working remotely, there's been a general trend towards asynchronous stand-ups, which is basically that rather than people getting on a video call, even not even just video calling, but actually not even getting on a call and just talking on Microsoft Teams and being like, yeah, I did this yesterday, I'm going to do this today. The advantage of that is that there's no need to find a suitable time for everyone, which is really helpful with uni because you're all got different timetables. It works well for big teams because it can be really tiresome to go through 8 people. The downside, though, is that if there are issues that you can resolve quickly, it's harder because everyone's async. It's easy to forget to give an update without a physical meeting. It's a little less personal, which kind of kills morale. That's the problem with it. It also is a good chance to remind you that the common trope with stand-ups is that people say, I have nothing to update, so I don't need to attend. Or I have nothing to update, so these are pointless. The point of stand-ups is about reflection too. It's about getting up for 3 days in a row and saying, I didn't do anything. Which is okay. Your team should be comfortable with that if there were legitimate reasons. But sometimes that's helpful. I didn't do anything again today because, I've been busy with this assignment. Someone says, do you want some help? I can help out if you're really busy. I have a busy assignment next week. So it's all sparks. It's all there to start a conversation and keep things going. So stand-ups are all about short daily kind of things. We talked a little bit about meetings before in this context of a sprint, a week of work. I think I've said everything here. Weekly meetings should be on a call. or like should be in a meeting, whether that's in person or on a call. It says at least once a fortnight, but you should ideally meet once a week, and your tutor will probably expect that too. You can meet during, if you can't find a time that works, meet during the lab time. All of you are free during the lab time, or at least you're required to be. During meekly meetings, it's also important that you often try and set an agenda or keep notes. Have someone take notes. Sometimes we call these notes meeting minutes. It's a bit of a strange name, but meeting minutes is another way of saying meeting notes. And typically, all you have to store in these minutes are who came, what did you want to talk about, what were the discussion points, and what were the actions. And to be honest with you, for the group, for the kind of 1531 project, I would really focus on the discussion points and the actions. You all know who's probably going to attend the meetings. You can include that if you want. And the agenda is going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to be, let's all update on what's happened and plan the next week and stuff. And I don't expect you to have much of an agenda with like weekly meetings in this really intense course, because it's not like you're going to say, oh, I have a problem, I'll wait till Monday to talk about it. You'll just solve it, because the iterations are only a couple of weeks long. Where do you store this? You can store this in a markdown file in your repository. You can store it in a Google Doc. It doesn't really matter. It's kind of up to you, and your tutor can help you out with that. Another area that's important is tickets and task boards, basically task tracking. So one cool thing about GitLab is that your repositories all have what we call a board on it. For instance, let's go and look up someone's project. Let me see if I can find one. No, I'm looking for a group that's updated their project. Let me sort by updated at. Hopefully, there we go. W17B Aero. Maybe they've already done it. Maybe we can look at their stuff. If they've already touched it, then so GitLab's changed its UI, so I'm looking for it. Issues? Okay, so in issues boards on GitLab, yay, they haven't done anything. So W17B Aero is actually in their lab right now. So hi, W17B Aero. Nice to have you here. So these boards are basically just task trackers. It's where you put tasks down. So for instance, what I can do here is I can create a task called, maybe like, this is for iteration 1, by the way. Remember, this is all for iteration 1, not for iteration 0. Or I can say, implement auth register v1. Okay, I can create that item, and then over here I can assign it to Hayden, like this, so it's Hayden's problem. And then I've kind of got these like little columns here, and I can make another column, which I might call like, how do I make another column? I always forget this every single term. Edit board. So like, oh, plus, no. Someone always tells me in the chat too. Happens over, create list. Oh, there we go. That's a bit unintuitive. Okay. Issues must match the scope and the... They've changed the UI, or I'm really dumb. Anyway, the point is that typically you have a few columns, and those columns like the easiest way to call the columns, right, are like a to-do, or what you sometimes call a backlog. Then you have like your in progress, the ones you're doing now, and then you have closed, which are things that you're either done or you're not going to do. And typically there'll be 3 columns here, and you will simply, like, when something's done, you might drag it across here. So, you're like, okay, I've done that. And typically you'll only drag it across after a merge request has been merged in, not beforehand. So, yeah. Create list. I don't understand what this label here is meant to be. Issues must match this scope to appear in this list. T? Closed? I don't know. That's not good. At the very least, you only really need 2 columns, which is like to do and done. And a big part of like this project, because we get students all the time, they ask us, oh, can we use Jira? Can we use Trello? Can we use this? Can we use that? Yeah, we don't mind what software you use. We recommend the GitLab taskboard because it's right there. You don't need any other logins. You don't need any other this. Tutors already know how to look at it, but as long as you're using some kind of software to track tasks, and as long as the software you're using to track tasks is task tracking software, don't come and say we want to use Google Docs You could use Google Sheets if you really wanted to, I guess, but ask your tutor. They'll give you the okay or the not okay. But yeah, basically these boards exist to track tasks. That's the absolute short story. Toggle focus mode. Focus mode. That's quite funny. Great. I'll come back to the adding a new column if I figure out how to do that. I feel like it's this, but I don't know. I don't know what that is. That's okay. GitLab seems to update a lot. Okay, so that's task boards. Pretty straightforward. Sometimes in reality they look like physical things, so this is much less often true now. But they all kind of follow the same thing. It's like you typically just have stuff, tasks in columns. Columns tend to indicate progress. Is the short answer. Please do get help from your tutor on the task board because they'll probably know how to do that. I may have just forgotten right now. Task boards are available in GitLab. Great. Okay, so last couple of things. Pair programming is a fun little topic. You might have heard of it before. I'm not sure if they talk about it in 1511. It's the idea where you have two programmers at one computer and one keyboard. With an async world, sometimes this is just two people on a video call where one person is sharing and writing code. And it's really interesting because it's not that you're both writing code at the same time. And it's really useful for complicated topics, like things that are really hard to do, that like maybe you wouldn't feel comfortable just doing yourself, because how you do it is that I might be sitting here writing code and we're trying to solve a problem. Maybe we're trying to implement a function or write some tests. And the person who you're pairing with, they aren't writing code, they're kind of talking to you. And the way the dynamic basically works is that the person who's writing code is thinking very low level. They're thinking literally about the code they're writing and the syntax, as you do when you program. And the other person you're talking with is more like they're talking with you like, oh, yeah, we should have a test like this. And you're like, yeah, we should have a test that tests this. And you're discussing and you're the one implementing it. But because they're not writing code, they can kind of step back and think a bit. They can think at a slightly higher level. Because when you write code, it's really easy to get into tunnel vision. You might forget the purpose of what you're doing. So it's really just that chance to split, ironically, that level of abstraction up. So someone's dealing a little higher level and someone's dealing a little lower level. It's a lot of fun. You should try it out sometime. Tell your tutor. It'll make them think you're really good at what you're doing. Be like, we pair programmed yesterday. And they'll be like, oh, it's so great. So you go do that. And last thing is just handling conflict. So human relationships are wonderful and messy. Family, friends, partners, and COMP1531 team members. It should be a bumper sticker or something. Someone get a t-shirt for that. Yeah. We could sell some t-shirts. Make some money. The most important thing you can do in a group work situation is constantly communicate with both your team members and your tutor. This is really important. As long as you are always talking to your teammates about how you feel and what's on your mind, and you're talking to your tutor in cases where you feel like you're not, getting through to them like you want to be, you will generally be okay. So if we talk about a few handling conflict topics, then we're at the end. So what I've done here, I've thought about this for so many terms and years. Like, how do we talk about dealing with group issues? And I don't like talking about it abstractly. Like in a group, it's really important to communicate and share your thoughts. And if you're having conflict, the first step is to, it just goes over your head. It's like you all know how to work in a group, right? Like me talking to you and being like, it's important that you respect each other. It's important that you aren't rude to each other. I hope to hell you all, is that a swear word? I don't know. Anyway, I hope you understand that, right? I hope so. I hope I don't have to tell you not to be rude. So telling you that doesn't help because, and this again, if you've got family, friends, or partners, you kind of know that things don't just go wrong because one of you is a horrible person. They go wrong because people get confused. They get out of sync. They don't know what's going on. They misunderstand each other. So what we're doing today is we're phrasing things like questions or scenarios, and we'll just talk about what to do in that scenario. So first scenario, you know more than your group members. Maybe you're a genius. Maybe your group members are not a genius. And it's really frustrating because you feel like they're slow and you feel like you know more and you feel like they're dragging you down and, blah, blah, blah. I'm too smart for them. If you are legitimately too smart for them, relatively speaking, then the best thing to do is take a break, go work on some other assignments. Thankfully, COMP1531 isn't always about you, always, right? And you can do perfectly well if your group isn't super smart. In fact, this project in general is not that complicated. I know that sounds, I don't want to be all, sounding elitist, but it's kind of not. Like, for a 9-week, 70% major project, it's a pretty reasonable challenge to tackle with 5 people. So if you focus on doing work on time and coordinating, and your team members are not, completely struggling, then just take a break. You don't have to move like the wind. It's okay to wait for them. Give them time to catch up. If you're really passionate, go talk to your tutor, and they'll show you how you can actually solve more problems in ways that aren't disruptive to your group. And in some rare situations where this is very rare, you feel like your group's intellect is actually damaging things, like they're just breaking stuff all the time. It's very rare that happens. Normally people who aren't as smart as you or don't have as much time as you are just slower. Then talk to your tutor. They'll help you out. They'll look at it and they'll be like, no, your team members are fine. You're just ahead of the curve. And they'll be like, just wait. Just take a break. Otherwise, or they'll be like, yeah, okay, I understand how this is disruptive, so go talk to your tutor. My group members aren't doing enough, right? So it's not that they aren't, you don't feel like they're good enough. They just aren't doing the work, right? So if they aren't doing the work, communicate this to them on Microsoft Teams. Message them. Like, tell them that you feel a problem exists. Be like, hey, I'm getting really nervous. I'm getting really stressed because I feel like, we have all this work to do and not enough's getting done. And I feel like we set some goals and that we didn't hit those goals. And ask them, be like, what do you think we can do about this? I have this like, you got to be careful not to take it passive aggressively, but I have a saying that's like, like every ounce of anger starts with like 3 questions. So every time you're angry or frustrated, sorry. Yeah, someone made a joke on the chat. Every time you have a problem or you're frustrated, ask yourself, what 3 questions can I ask them? How are you feeling? Are you okay? What can we do to fix this? How can we make sure it's not going to happen again? And sometimes the answers will just be good. They'll be like, oh, look, honestly, I've had a really bad 72 hours. My mum's been really sick. I don't think I can do this part. I think I can do half of it. How do you feel about doing the other half? And then next week things will be better. And you'll be like, great, we solved it just by asking some questions. And if that is a problem, the joke was really funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. If that is a problem, talk to your tutor. Like, if your group just doesn't respond and they're like, yeah, we'll fix it, and they do nothing, then talk to your tutor and talk to them soon. Email your tutor privately. On this topic too, about team members not doing enough, I would strongly encourage all of you to set clear targets, always. Don't just be like, oh, we should get these functions done sometime this week. Be like, let's get these done by Wednesday. It's like a really basic management tactic. It's like, doesn't matter. Like, if it's 12 o'clock and someone's going to the grocery store, be like, oh, you're going to be able to grab groceries by 1 o'clock. That's better than saying soon. Because if you say soon and it takes 2 hours, they might think that's soon. It leaves less room for misunderstanding. So wherever you can, work with tangible things. Because it also helps conflict. Because if you say, let's do this soon, and then your group member doesn't do it, and then you're like, why didn't you do it? They're like, because it's been a day, bro. However people talk, they have a reason. It's reasonable for them to think soon was a day. So it's much better when you talk concretely, because otherwise you just kind of delay and you have to go have that conversation anyway. My group members have disappeared. Okay, if they disappeared, message them. Ask them where they are. Hello, I haven't heard from you in a couple of days. I'm getting very nervous. If they don't reply within 2 or 3 days, then we basically just recommend that you pretend they're not going to come back. All right. Whether they come back is a different thing. If they come back, if they reappear after 4 days of silence, right? They've lost the opportunity to work on some stuff. They're probably going to do less commits. They're probably going to get less work done, and the scaling will be different. Like, the individual marks will be different. So it's like their inconvenience of disappearing will be compensated for by the fact that you've had more opportunity to do work, and like, so to speak, you might kind of have a bit more marks than them or something like that. And if they disappear, you've already made plans for them to disappear. So you kind of give them 2 to 3 days. And if they do not, show up, talk to your tutor. And sometimes what happens is that they, what would you say? Sometimes they show up and they've got special consideration because there was a death in the family. And you know what happens then? Don't stress. Your tutor finds out about that. And what they do is they just mark your group more leniently then. Because if your team member had a serious problem and they disappeared, then your tutor looks at that and takes that into account when you mark. Okay, last couple of things. I've got 3 left. Your group members are merging in broken code. This is them doing naughty things. Message them and ask them politely to stop doing it. If they don't respond, or they don't respond positively, saying they'll change, then go talk to your tutor. Don't be passive aggressive, and don't be a douche. I don't know if douche is an okay word, but let's just roll over that for a second. Don't be a bad person. Just ask politely, guys. Don't be like, excuse me, where are you? I expect better from you. Just be like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but you merging in code that's breaking is really hard for me. Do you think it's possible we stop that? And hopefully they're like, yeah. Do you need any help? Do you need any help to stop merging in broken code? Right? Most of the time, again, people are not bad. They're just confused or struggling or lacking some knowledge, experience, or understanding. Right? It's pretty straightforward. So be nice, and don't be passive aggressive. This is one thing I used to say to groups sometimes, like, if you're angry at someone, just ask them a few questions, to investigate in an honest, friendly way if everything's okay. And I've seen some groups take my advice and be like, excuse me, do you even care about 1531, or do you just think that my marks don't matter to you? And it's like, that's like bad. That's being passive aggressive. That's just being a poo-poo in a whole other way. So just be a good person. Take the high road. So second last thing, we're nearly at 8 o'clock. If your group members are being rude, I say here to message them and politely ask them to stop doing that. You can go straight to your tutor if you feel they're being rude. You're well within your rights to go straight to your tutor. Though I'd probably recommend that you talk to your group first, because you don't have to. You're not required to, and I'm very only lightly encouraging you to, because if you're going to have to work with these people all term, sometimes it is easier to at least have tried to resolve it with them. So that if your tutor has to get involved, your tutor's like, hey, Hayden tried to talk to you about how he's feeling, and he's feeling a bit hurt and dejected. It's just a bit easier that way, and it makes, it's, see how you go. But again, talk to your tutor. Or maybe the best advice I can give you there is talk to your tutor, because your tutor might say go and address it with them if it's light. If they're like, oh, my group members are kind of ignoring me in the chat, the tutor's going to be like, go and talk to them. Just go and tell them that. If you're like, if you're like, the group members are calling me like derogatory, words associated with, generally females, then your tutor's probably just going to be like, add me to the channel and I'll come and find them and, make sure they're not being bad people. So last thing, notice the trend is pretty simple. Be on the front foot. Where it's reasonable, talk to your group. Try and resolve the issue with them. Email the tutor if things aren't solved. Do so soon. Don't delay with that. Don't turn around after 3 weeks and tell your tutor there was an issue. Tell your tutor there's an issue as soon as you feel there's an issue. That protects you. It helps them make sure you aren't just like making up stories later on down the path. So anyway, hope that's been helpful. Please fill in the, other side. Please fill in the feedback down there. If you can. None of you really care. That's okay. I expect that. Please have a great evening. Thank you for coming along. Send you a notice on Friday with some updates about everything, labs, marks, iterations and stuff. And to see you on Monday. And I'll talk about Monday. We probably still will run the lecture on Monday on the public holiday, but it's recorded just so it's simple. But anyway, I'll send you an update on Friday about that, because I'll confirm all the details and pass them on. Have a great evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. It's always great to see people here live, and appreciate your patience as always. Have a great evening.